You're listening to Conflict Radio on the Conflict Radio Network. Greetings, and welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is March 1st, 2021, and today we are going to have Geraldine Orozco on the show. Now, Geraldine researches the role of DNA as a currency of the past, present, and future, with consciousness as the catalyst. A life-changing contact experience in 2013 resulted in the activation of psychic abilities, and in 2017, she underwent several hypnotic regressions with vetted therapists. Regressions uncovered a lifelong history of abduction and participation in human hybridization, with 24 hybrid children as a result. Her life is dedicated to the dissemination of knowledge of hybridization programs and the correction of the commonly held dogma of the human genetic timeline, historical record, and human structure. You excited for this, Jared?
Yeah, this is going to be really good. It's all the things we've been talking about, and it's from someone that has personal experiences that should be really, really interesting to hear.
Awesome. And I'm really looking forward to this show, too. It's going to be a lot of fun. So let's not mince words. Let's just get right down to it. If you're not subscribed to Conflict Radio, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us out a whole lot. Don't forget to like the video, and we'll be right back right after this. Welcome back to Conflict Radio. We've got Jared Murphy still with us, and Geraldine Orozco. Did I say that right?
That's correct. You got it.
All right. Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to chat with you because we have some fascinating topics to discuss. You really are a fascinating person, and your work is really interesting to me. I want to first ask you if you can tell everybody kind of, I guess, about your abduction experiences. We might as well get into that and get that kind of under wraps and out of the way as we move into some of these other things. You want to tell everybody who you are and how you got started in this field?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me, Michael and Jared, on this show today. It's a pleasure to be here. How did I get started in the field? My journey started in about 2008, 2009, when I started teaching meditation, and I started to go into a very deep inquiry, self-inquiry, where I started to really question consciousness and reality and everything that we see and we perceive as reality. And what triggered that was the passing away of my partner at the time. It really made me question life and death, and just all the experiences that we have. They seemingly seem to kind of come up as patterns, as repetitive patterns. So I was very interested in that. And I started to deep dive into all of this by meditating, and sometimes up to 8 hours a day. And in 2013, I had a very incredible experience where I began to, one night, just in the middle of the night, I had a experience where there was a light in my room, and I was literally taken out of my bedroom into a craft. And, this really just kind of shattered my perception of reality and how I saw everything, as I had been working on understanding how to deprogram all of the false programming that I had been experiencing throughout my life. Anything that caused suffering and pain. And when this experience happened, it shattered even another layer of that, of that reality that I had just newly discovered, I guess you could say. So this is kind of how it began. And I really went into this incredible experience that after seeing and being introduced to my hybrid children and information about the structure of the universe, what this quote unquote matrix or holographic reality that we live in, or simulation that we live in, is built, and our role in that simulation. I woke up the very next morning, about 3-4 hours later, at 6 a.m, and I was upside down on the side of my bed, and I had an ability to see the multidimensional body. I mean, it felt like my entire body was sore. I felt like I got hit by a truck. And the very next thing is the very first person that I saw. I mean, I couldn't even stand next to them, that I could feel their energy. I could see everything that they were seeing, feel everything that they were feeling. And I began to see these colors in their body and chords and connections and all kinds of things. So this experience activated somehow this kind of psychic abilities within me. And it took many years to kind of integrate and be able to go out, fully engaging with people and as normal, after that. So this is kind of how it began.
All right. Well, I mean, there's a quite a bit there that we need to kind of unpack. You say you were introduced to your hybrid children. Could you tell us exactly how that all went down? Like, how do you know that it was your child, and where's that child now?
hmm Yeah, absolutely. So, when they took me on the craft, several things happened that were very interesting and important to kind of this whole experience. I mean, first of all, I was terrified, and I literally felt them pull me through the wall, through my window. So I was at one moment inside of my window, looking out the window at this incredibly bright light, burning my eyes. And the next moment, I'm outside of my window, in front of these six tall grays. And these grays had these enormous eyes, very thin skeletal bodies, and they would bring me into the craft with them. They removed my emotion from my body. So any kind of terror or feeling of wanting to scream or yell out, I was thinking my neighbors would hear, or call someone's attention, but no sound came out of my body. I mean, it was silent. And they telepathically said the word calm, and all of a sudden all my emotions just went to zero, neutral, completely neutral. And so it was completely a new experience, because I never experienced, first of all, telepathy, and second of all, the ability of somebody else removing my own emotions or having any kind of power or control over my body. So I was taken into the craft, and immediately, this is a lenticular type craft. It was quite large, and as I enter into the craft, I'm seeing in detail everything, like the flooring underneath me, how the craft curves, and as I'm brought in, they create a hologram within the craft that changes what it looks like inside, and it looks like a fake sky and a fake grassy ground underneath me, very, very fake looking, deliberately. And they bring me, I think, to mask what I was looking at within the craft. They mask it with this scenery, that they bring me into a room, and as I turn around, I see a woman walking in front of me in between these two other tall grays. And when I look closer, it was my aunt. Now, the interesting thing about this is that years later, when I went to hypnotherapy, I kind of invited my whole family to join this kind of discovery process, and they all went under hypnotherapy. And she actually found out that she had contact experience the exact same night that I did. So I was seeing her here in this craft, and I was alarmed, and I said, "Oh my God, what is she doing here?" So she walks in front of me, and then they just remove everything. She's zombied out. She can't see. She's not conscious. And they move her into another room. And as they remove everything in front of me, the next thing I see is I'm inside something that looks like a control room of some sort, maybe a navigation room. To the right side, there's this beautiful oval table with this incredibly advanced hologram, three-dimensional hologram of a planetary system. I mean, it was beautiful, and it was in color blue. And I'm noticing that the craft, when I look around the room, I mean, this is happening in 1 minute, right? Just looking around the room, I can see through the craft to the other side, and I literally see the stars on the other side of the craft. It's almost as if the craft is moving, or it's translucent, or it's more like a vibration as opposed to a solid. And as I'm here in front of these three grays in front of me, they present this prism, this holographic blue prism with 8 layers that they begin to show me information on every layer. The very first one began with some kind of alien language. And they speak in infinities. It was a combination of mathematical equations with symbols, this very, very complex language of some sort. And I started to try to understand what they were telling me, but what it was is they speak in infinities. I mean, every single dot, every single curve is a very complex thought that is not just trying to, put across a certain idea. It's a collective idea. It's a very interesting way of thinking and communicating. And the next prism, they showed me, they took me to a planet called Maya. And of course, that's in the constellation Pleiades. And they begin to show me that I had some roots within that lineage. And in the third prism, they introduced me these yellow lights, and the yellow lights manifest before me, and 4 of which manifest into these children. And one of them begins to walk towards me, this beautiful child that has this very thin, grayish, very light skin, very curly, almost translucent skin, hair, and very frail, small, thin body. And the eyes are just enormous and complex. And when I look into the eyes of this child, I get this shiver down my spine that unbelievably, I'm recognizing myself in this child. Something about the eyes, something about the way that the child is looking at me. And a thought crosses my mind, and I'm like, is this my child? And immediately, the other 4 begin to come towards me, and I see them in detail. They are all a mixture of humanoid children with a reptilian, with gray features, with just very strange children. You can tell that they are a mixture, not 100% humanoid. And, I part of me is terrified. Part of me, I'm so confused. I don't know what to do. My mind is trying to place this experience and trying to think who on earth or who in our community should I talk to about this, because these children are not mine. And I'm thinking, how am I supposed to care for them? Am I supposed to take them back? Just an incredibly confusing, moment. And they tell me telepathically in my mind, these are your children. And the child begins to see me and somehow have this telepathic exchange with me that I can remember everything. Now I'm having all these memories emerging, everything that has happened with this child. I remember holding it in my arms. I remember somehow giving birth to it, but not in the way that we give birth. All of these memories flood my mind, and I'm so confused. I'm thinking, how is it possible that I... Oh,
Do we lose you there for a second?
Sorry. Can you hear me okay, Michael?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
I lost you there for a moment.
That's
okay.
all right. I'll write down the time. Just go ahead and pick up.
Yeah, so I'm just being introduced to the child, and I'm meeting other 3. The other 3 are different. You can tell that they're mixed with different kinds of species. The most impactful one is the Reptilian Child that literally had scales on the face, kind of a greenish tone to the skin, and the eyes were just unbelievable. They were like the slit reptilian eyes, but they were enclosed inside of a larger iris. A larger brownish green iris. So part of it was terrifying, but at the same time, I could tell that these children had a connection to me, and this incredible maternal instinct takes over. And I'm processing in my mind, and I'm really having this moment where I'm thinking, okay, these are my children. I don't know where they came from, but I don't know how I forgot that they appeared. I'm ready to let go of my life on Earth. This is what I'm thinking, and just dedicate myself to them. And right when I'm processing this idea, they immediately removed them from in front of me, and I'm hysterical. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, please don't remove them from me. And they begin to show me the matrix. They begin to show me and tell me, in other words, we are one. There's no separation. They're here. These children are here, and they show me the earth, and they show me down to the microscopic level all these different things. They begin to show me that they're particles, that they're oscillating, that they all create these electromagnetic fields, and that we're living in this sea of matter, of interconnected energy. And it's the first time in my life that I ever had that concept. I saw that concept for what it really was and understood it. And it was the first time that I felt completely somehow disconnected from all things, but at the same time incredibly interconnected to everything.
Yes.
So this is what happened, and then I ended up on the upside down on the end of my bed, and I felt like a migraine and a body ache, and my entire body was sore for about a week. Yeah.
Did they ever? Have you seen them again since then?
Not this particular group. I've had many, many other contact experiences.
I meant your children.
With the children, not particularly. No.
Okay.
No.
Now,
Yeah.
did you get an idea of how old they were?
Yes, yes. One of them was about 4 years old. Another one was about 8. Another one was about 12 years old, and the oldest one was about 26.
All right. So I
Yeah.
guess I want to ask a question. Did it seem like they're aging about the same as humans do?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, the majority of these children are not really meant to grow. They're meant to stay at the stage of children their entire life, their entire existence. And there's many reasons for that. And there's also many agendas that are behind these hybrid children. It really just depends on what the agenda, you can say, that they're trying to carry out with the child would be.
Do you think that that's the age that they're created at?
No, they are born and they are raised. They are raised, they are taught, but a lot of them will not go beyond a certain age. They will look like children their entire lifespan or existence. There's a couple of reasons for that. We can get into that in just a moment. But
Okay.
again, it really just depends on the agenda. I mean, I've had 24 hybrid children, and I've been in 4 or 5 different programs, one of them being terrestrial, one of them being draconian, one of them being reptilian, and one of them being the humanoid, which is this program that I'm sharing with you right now that I was introduced.
Now, when you say program, you're talking about like a matrix style program, right?
When I say program, I'm talking about the hybridization program from a sense that there seems to be some kind of collective organization behind the intention behind making these children.
Okay.
And they're different purposes, and yet when you look at it from the highest level, I believe that the reason is the same. The reason is the same. I mean, what they're using our genetic code in order to create more life, and there's a reason for that. It's in a sense they're utilizing consciousness to preserve and to continue some kind of connection or communication with this human race.
All right. I feel like I'm taking up all. We haven't really heard from Jared. Jared, you're still there, right?
Yeah, of course I'm still here. Yeah.
Right, awesome. Do you have any questions on?
I guess
I'm sure
I
know
have
you
some
do.
questions,
Yeah.
but I just want some clarification on it before I ask a good question. How old were you the first time this happened?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, are you talking about the first time I was participant in the program,
Well,
or?
what was the first? So there's two problems. One
Mhm.
is I would ask the question, uh, what's the first time you recall, or
Mhm.
later through, as from what I can tell, at least from what I know of your bio so far, I there's recalling and doing, rediscovering your memories. But what's your first? Did you recall everything later, or what's the first experience you've had that you recall being in real time? Was this the
Yes.
first one?
Yeah, so the very first one was when I was 5 years old, and I remember it very vividly. And but I didn't understand it, when at that time or throughout my entire life, really, until I came across this. You see, the moment when I had the first contact in 2013, it was really the first time that I considered the word alien as something real. You got to understand. Before that, I mean, I really didn't have a place for it in my reality, and the thing is that when I was 5 years old, I was in my parents' bedroom and I was looking outside the windows about dusk, and incredibly bright white light showed up. And this is an image that I can never remove from my mind. But I know that I had missing time, because after I saw the white light, I just found myself waking up in my crib, in my little bed that I was in, hours later. So I don't remember what happened from the moment of the white light to the moment of being in the crib or in the bed. And so this was the first vivid memory that I had throughout my life. And I really didn't think much of it because, of course, I didn't think it was related to any of this. But there are several events like this. That was the first one. And in that experience, I was taken into a craft and I was implanted at the very back of my uterus. There was an implant that was made in order to monitor the body. So I was basically signed up for this program, you can say, since birth, because at the age of 5, it was already scheduled, all of the visits that were going to happen throughout my life. At 5, at the age of 15, 16, when I lived in Bolivia for a couple of years, was actually the first insemination. And then after that, there were subsequent visits after that.
Where were you when you were 5? I mean, was it at home? Were you on a trip? Did it happen to anyone else that you were with? Did you ever ask anyone in that period when you were? Do you recall anyone else possibly being?
No, it was just me. It was right before my little brother was born. We were here in Fremont, California. So it was just, just in the bedroom. I was an only child. And I think my mother wasn't home, but my father was home. And he was in the other room watching TV. And I just remember hearing the TV in the background and playing next to their bed, next to the window. And next thing you know, this incredibly white light comes in and boom, can't remember anything until I wake up in my bed hours later, So what happened in between there? I mean, we tried to go over it with my parents, but, they don't remember. They don't remember really what happened or anything strange, I guess you could say.
So did it happen? Go ahead.
Pardon me. They do remember me mentioning the light, though. They remember that I always mentioned that light. That's something that they do remember. Mm-hmm.
Well, so the first time, have you had further recall of what happened during that?
Yes.
Or okay,
Yes.
What happened with the 5?
Yeah. So at the age of 5, I'm taken in Boardcraft. I'm seeing the white light, and I was taken into this very dark, dim, humid, kind of cavernous-looking craft of some sort. And there is a draconian being to the right side of me who is enormous, dark. And I'm being seated on a kind of reclining chair. It looks like a dental type of chair, but very minimalistic and incredibly modern. And as I'm being placed there, something is being inserted with this mechanical arm that comes, it looks like it comes out of nowhere, but it's an arm that comes inside of my uterus and implants something, leaves something there. Very, very cold, incredibly cold. And they begin to play this kind of music in the background to kind of distract me about what's happening in that moment. And the energy that I feel from these draconians are so dark, so incredibly dark, it really is like being in the presence of someone that is very evil, that we perceive them as evil. We have this idea around that, what that feels like. So that's, our point of reference. And so they're doing this to me. And finally I end up in my bed. So this was the very first time. And so it looks like the first part of this experience with the draconians concluded later on at the age of 16 when I had first insemination. And then I think it was 24 and I think 25, 27, several events that were incredibly impactful, not just because they were memories that happened, but physically I became ill after the contact experience, like very, very ill. Yeah, and I can get into those in just a minute, but I don't know if you have any more questions about that directly.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on the, from the first time something happens to someone, and then I do think it sets a stage for what further happens and or how much of it is, I can only imagine how not only confusing or interesting or mysterious it is to have an experience. It's compounded by what could be either internal biological changes and or psychological changes, or like you said, the music was a distraction. So I know that we've set up a time for you to come back. There's no way for all the places and things people would be curious about. And a lot of people might just be fascinated with the just general topic. And so my questions are unfortunately going to dig. For all those out there who want to just go to some obvious places, I was thinking more about the music being a programmer. And then I'm thinking, I wonder what it's been like to have a lifetime of experiences where on one layer you recall or experience something. And then as you revisit the experience, whether you're remembering something that you've forgotten or realizing a layer that wasn't there or is that you weren't expecting. And I'm wondering if any of those sublayers, whether it's something implanted or whether it's a music you hear or a sound, a tone, if there is a reoccurring theme to all of it, or do you think they're all independent? Do you think because of the first experience at 5, do you have an overall, I guess we could start with, do you think that there is an overall reason that you were chosen for this, or bad luck?
No. And actually, one of the things that I'd like to dispel is the idea that, there's something special about me. I think the reason why I think the interesting thing about me in this experience is that I was able to remember, and I had a vivid conscious experience. What happened to me in 2013 was absolutely in person, conscious, vivid in the flesh, having this experience. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't lucid dreaming. It wasn't, paralysis or any of that. It was a vivid experience. So I believe that through my meditation work, somehow, because I had deprogrammed layers of, belief systems, I began to kind of tap in to parts of me that were aware of these sub layers in the subconscious mind. And that's where things started to come up. And I think that as a result of that, I began to remember more things about my life that had been there. For example, at the age of 20, I believe it was 24, I got some kind of amoeba, that right? And I got so sick that doctor said that if I don't take the antibiotic, I would die. I would literally die within 3 months. And I'm allergic to antibiotics. I've been allergic to antibiotics since I was at the age of 16 when I had my first insemination. Being a part of this program makes you incredibly sensitive to medicines. It's almost as if they don't want you to take any kind of medications or anything because somehow, obviously, the chemicals or something causes some kind of reaction or change in the DNA somehow. But I haven't been able to take those kinds of medications throughout my entire life after this event at the age of 16. So it was very difficult, this experience, because we thought I was going to die at that age. And, I'm taking all these antibiotics because I have to. And I become so ill. And then after 2 weeks, I lost 20 pounds and it was horrendous. And at the end of those 2 weeks, everything was gone. There was no amoeba in sight. There was nothing. I couldn't take any of the medications. And what happened is that I had an experience before all of this began. And it wasn't until the hypnotherapy that I began to understand what happened. And it was an abduction where they had put into my body some kind of blue liquid to be able to sustain an environment for the zygote or the fetus to develop itself within the body, something that, otherwise the body would completely reject because it's a foreign element. It's a combination of DNA. It's not just a regular human combination, So this made me very ill. And it's not that I had, even though I had 24 hybrid children, these experiences were so impactful and so clearly vivid in my life that, when you begin to look back at them and the marks on my body that appeared and the events that were next to those, you begin to see, that there's not just a regular experience that you can associate this kind of phenomena with.
All right, I want to jump in here for a second and ask a question, Jared. I don't mean to interrupt. I hope that's okay. I wanted to ask you. So you carried the fetuses to full term?
No. The longest that I carried the fetus was about 3.5 months.
Okay.
And after that time, they are removed. They are either removed before that or the latest about 4 or 5 months. And I see this with my clients as well. I mean, now I connect with hybrid parents from around the world that tell me about their experiences. And, the majority of them, the longest I've seen it is 5 months. There was also a lady in a documentary that I made that was, she was a lesbian. She was born lesbian, and she became pregnant. And this also happened to me when I was not partnered. I became pregnant. So this is a very anomalous kind of pregnancies that happened, and all of a sudden, then the fetus is not there anymore. Your pregnancy test is positive, and then your fetus is not there anymore. And the doctors will call it a blighted ovum. They will say that it's stress. It's a stress caused by stress or hormones that we became pregnant. But when it happens often like this, and in a way that's connected with other events, that's when you begin to kind of question, and it's happening to many women.
Okay. Do you
Have
think
has there been any testing on the fetuses? Not the fetuses, but is there any Carillion photography, anything being done? Have you been able to devise any testing before they lose the fetuses? Has anybody come to you? Have you been able to do anything with it?
Yeah, not yet, not yet. And that's something that I'm really trying to do. This is going to be our next step to try kind of understand, what's happening. But my main focus and what's more important is to provide support for the women, because what's happening is that they go to the gynecologist, and of course the gynecologist will dismiss it completely. And the women, they're kind of going crazy because they're like, I know this is happening to me. It's connected with other events, and I'm having marks on my body. I'm having these traumatic experiences happen, and I'm pregnant, and then I'm not pregnant. And, you got to understand that when a woman, she gets pregnant, I mean, we're talking about major hormonal rise and falls, emotional rise and falls that she goes through. So it's a very emotional process. And so they deserve to have the support psychologically, emotionally, and medically that's needed, for whatever it is, whether this is a collective phenomena that we're going through, I don't know, some kind of psychosis that we're going through, or whether we're actually talking about, abduction and insemination. We need to understand it. So it's very hard. I mean, women have positive pregnancy tests, and then they have these miscarriages. The miscarriages usually will not have the fetus there. The fetus will be missing. And it's usually connected with an experience that they are, they recall it, or they remember this through either hypnosis or at a later time, Yeah. And what's interesting about this is that, when you begin to hear the stories of these women, and I mean, I've heard hundreds of stories at this point. They are quite similar. They are quite similar in, there's different kind of beings that are involved in it, but the procedure is somewhat the same. There's this kind of, they don't go to full term. It goes about 4-5 years, 5 months, and then the child is removed. The fetus is removed and put into incubation tanks. And I mean, when it happened to me, I saw tanks and tanks and walls of these incubation tanks. So it's kind of a large program. And the thing is that it's not just what we may think as extraterrestrial. There's also a terrestrial program that is occurring, which is very much connected to military abductions, my labs. So that's another part of this that's very important. That's good to talk about as well.
Do you think that they're manipulating time?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll tell you why. This is one of the things that I realized early on, that the fetus that they removed from the body is oftentimes much more developed at that time than a human. So, for example, within 4 or 5 months, usually the child is a very small fetus, but what they remove is much larger. It probably looks like something that's about, I don't know, 6 months, 6-7 months. Yeah. And it's not removed necessarily in the same way that we give birth. It's somewhat of a cesarean type, not through the umbilical cord, or they take it through, the lower part of the body.
It's fascinating. Jared, did I cut you off, Jared? You had some...
No, I was cutting myself off to make sure you got your question in.
Oh, okay. Do you have anything else on that, Jared?
No, I mean, just to acknowledge first that there is clearly when any woman has this kind of experience, or I mean, at any time anybody gets their complete physical body taken from them and used without permission in any capacity, it must be just a nightmare. That's, it's not explainable really to people. I mean, the empathy involved. So the dealing with the trauma and dealing with the questions, I mean, that's obviously primarily what's important. I didn't want to sound too scientific and saying, take a picture, say cheese, let's see the magnetic aurora, let's start, that I do think though, to me, part of what I think though, defensively speaking, I mean, part of the point of my book personally was that the reason I say, people ask me in the title, why do you say it's not aliens, worse, it's us? I said, because people can accept if it is a foreign entity, interdimensional being, alien, people can accept that that's them. They can't accept the idea that a more advanced human, which clearly has been seen in what appears to be ancient ruins and a global civilization that is gone and we don't have a record of, the idea that other humans would continue to be here in an advanced fashion and not really help us, but actually experiment on us or use us as cattle is way worse, I think, of an idea. And the reason I think it's interesting getting our heads around the fact that we are being taken advantage of one way or the other, which pisses me off to no end when it comes to military. There are plenty of people who would volunteer for programs, ask, don't take. But when it comes to advanced, whether ancient humans from here or something from somewhere else, I feel like if we can start sorting out and being more aware of not only our past, but of these situations and the changes in us, maybe somehow we can start stopping them. That's my thoughts overall.
Well, what do you think? Do you think well, I guess you have 24 children. Do you feel do you feel anger about that?
That's a really great question. And I mean, the truth is that the hybridization program is a very, very complex topic because you're not just talking about this fantasy or idea that, we're being impregnated by these aliens, these interdimensional beings, and, that we are being used. It's a little more complex than that. The fact is, and here's how I realized this. I mean, when I first started to discover these experiences, part of me and my family, when they heard about this, they were horrified. And they were like, "How is this even possible? Like, who do we talk to?" And I remember when I first got back at 6 a.m. from that experience, I thought about calling the cops, the police, because I was thinking, I literally just got abducted. Who do I talk to for help, for support? And it crossed my mind to call them and to see there must be some organization or some department that handles this kind of stuff, I thought. But of course, there isn't. And I think a lot of people go through that. But the thing is that, by the way, I also want to clarify, it's not just women, men. Men also go through the hybridization program in a different way. And they are also quite traumatized about it. I mean, the other day, I had this gentleman that was working for the stock market who calls me and tells me about this. He says that he can't even go out into social events anymore because he can't handle the stress and the thought that at night he's going to have to be dealing with these kinds of experiences over and over again. So there's a part of this that we really need to understand, and it's the part of our role in this, in what's occurring when it's happening to us. It's so unbelievable. I mean, first of all, the whole concept of aliens, due to the entertainment industry, has been, in a sense, completely made a fantasy, something that is unreal, something that only crazy people would talk about. And I do believe that there is a reason behind that. But when we begin to hear these stories of people, for example, me, I wasn't into sci-fi. I wasn't interested in the alien phenomena before this happened to me. So, it's not like some kind of subconscious idea that I had, um, uh, you know. So anyway, these things happen to people. So the idea is like, where do we make the connection between our human lives and these extraterrestrial beings? All agreements. I think this is where we start getting into topic of consciousness. All experiences in our life we agree to them. We agree to them on some level. There's a subconscious agreement that is made, and that's true for these experiences as well. Where we begin to look at the experiences that are, to me, more impactful are the military abductions. Because for me, that they started to happen after I came public with my experiences. I had an abduction out of one of my Airbnbs that I was speaking at a conference, and I was taken to an underground base. And, I was injected in the back of my neck, and something was taken out of my spine. And it's genetic information. So my next question was, what is it that makes our genetic information so valuable? If these interdimensional beings are after it, and somehow there is some part of the government that is also interested in that in order to create cloning, what makes this so important? So I began to research that. And I began to also receive downloads about this information, remote viewing some of these events that happen through hypnotherapy. I began to understand that our DNA is actually holographic. Okay. And that the amount of storage that it contains of information of not just this lifetime, but multiple, fragments of ourself that we are connected to simultaneously, we're living through simultaneously, which kind of makes us an open experience to have these kinds of things. We can tap into these kinds of experiences at any time. So you begin to kind of go into these topics. And I believe that the further you go down the road of spirituality, you're going to be met with the question of consciousness, and you're going to be met with these extraterrestrial beings. And it's the same for the extraterrestrial phenomena. The deeper down the rabbit hole you go, you will be met with the question of consciousness, and you will meet this spiritual aspect of ours. So there's a definite connection between the two, and these agreements can be destroyed with these interdimensional beings in order to no longer have them. And we do so by changing our vibrational frequency and becoming a match to them. Changing our match to the resonance to these beings. And this is something that I did for myself. I stopped having these kinds of traumatic experiences, and I teach my clients how to do the same as well.
All right, so let's go back to the holographic DNA. How did you figure that out?
So I had been researching, trying to understand what makes our genetic code so important. Because at first, you have the idea that, we're so special. Something must be special about me. Something must be special about these people that are chosen. So what I began to see, first of all, in my first hypnosis, I began to download this map of our Earth, and it took me down a historical timeline tracing back all of the major royal bloodlines and the origin. And what I saw is that there were three actually main bloodlines that created our entire human race, that seeded life on this planet. And those main bloodlines are basically have been creating the most preserved bloodlines that we see historically, all the way from Mesopotamia out to to the royal palace, down to our presidential seat. 20, I believe it's like 27 presidents or 28 presidents are actually related. They're related to one another. So. And that's nothing. I mean, when we look at the people in power in our world today, 147 companies own all of the companies in this entire world. And those small amount of 147 companies are owned by a very small elite of families. And those bloodlines can be traced back to the very origin of literally life seated on this planet. I mean, even you and I, just 2,000 years ago, we are related. We have someone in common, So we have an origin point. So what I began to realize is that our genetic code, we're not the first. We've been going through these cyclical patterns of genetic modification for centuries, and there were certain lines that are heavily, heavily preserved. We see the Nazca skulls in South America. How did that bloodline show up all the way in Peru? So you begin to look at the connections of how these bloodlines have been moved and changed and genetically modified to create the human race. And we see that we have that genetic code within us. So, in fact, we are all genetically modified. We are all the hybrids that are being created. We have that information running in our DNA. And the hybridization program goes on further. It's not just the children that are being made from us. These children are sometimes put back into what we know as the reincarnation cycle. They're basically born back into our cycle. And we have children that are hybrids. And there's a woman named Mary Rodwell out of Australia, and she researches this about hybrids. These children that are about 8 years old, and they are so incredibly advanced. They remember their star lineages, all these things. I mean, it's really interesting. So there's many layers to this information.
It's fascinating, right? You start getting into DNA memory, right?
Right.
The memories of your ancestors and that was the main reason why I wanted to get you on the show, was to get you, and we were going to talk about how you can reprogram your DNA memory, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as I got into researching you, there's so much more. You know what I mean? That's why I scheduled you for another show right away, because you're a fascinating person, and there's so much that we have to talk about. And I guess I'll just shut up and hand it off to Jared, because I know he's got a ton to say right now.
Yeah, well, and it's half of me is just trying to figure out. We do this a lot where, like with Michael Cremo, and there's so many different guests we have on that have a large knowledge base. So it's where do we break it up for everyone listening to? So on one hand, it might be an introduction, or it might be a continuation for what people hear and see or know already. But then when we do get somebody on, then it has this kind of a knowledge and experience base. It's how do we break it up and keep it. It doesn't have to be an exact episode, but yeah, I guess for an actual follow-up question around that, when it comes to people's experiences of genetic memory, what has been your personal experiences with it? I guess is that not really something that's really affected you? Is it more people you've interviewed?
I'm sorry. What, can you rephrase the question? What exactly?
So people experience genetic memories, or they're, like you said, there's kids being programmed or reappearing. I guess I want to know what your experience is with the clients or the people you've interviewed that are saying, well, here's my knowledge base. You've specifically met children that have a knowledge base that's beyond their years, or is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly.
So can you give any examples to that?
Yes, sure. So I'm a certified hypnotherapist. I became a hypnotherapist in order to, further understand, first of all, hypnotherapy, and because of my experiences with hypnotherapy, but also to try to support those that are trying to integrate these experiences into their everyday life. And so I began to work with adults and children that have these experiences. And whether it's a DNA reprogramming or a hypnotherapy session, what I found is that these children, they carry information about, incredibly advanced physics, incredibly advanced concepts of our reality, of society, of evolution, that you would never even think. I mean, some of these children are speaking at college level, and they're like 6 years old. And you would think, at the age of 6, I mean, we were playing with dolls and we weren't thinking about any of this stuff. But these are incredibly advanced children, and a lot of them, they're very awake. They're awake in the fact where they're very aware of our current state in the world. They're aware of our state, I guess you can say, intergalactically, or the fact that there is some kind of intergalactic presence of some sort. And, they remember their past lives. They remember experiences of being on board craft. And these children are so young that it's not like they're sitting in front of TV watching sci-fi films. You know, they're 4 or 5 years old. These children are not influenced as much from entertainment industry or any of that. And the parents really spend a lot of time with them because these children really choose not to be connected to technology as much. They prefer to be out in nature. They prefer to the organic more than AI or anything like that. So it's very interesting. They're very special children. They are also intuitive. They have gifts that are advanced. They can sometimes read when they're blindfolded. They can see things. They're incredibly psychic. So these are children, and I think we've been seeing waves of these children for a long time. They have their genetic code per se activated. You know, they have a lot of parts of themselves activated, and we understand what DNA is more when we understand you know, the information that we're able to access. DNA is. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Do any of them? Okay, funny question. Of all the things you've heard, then from them, what is the most crazy, mind blowing, or surprising thing you've heard from one story individually?
There was a little child that, first of all, the way that the child was conceived was interesting. The mother had a experience, a very vivid experience, and the next day she became pregnant. Okay, so she became pregnant with this child. She gave birth to the child, and this child was born almost like a savant. They had an incredible affinity for numbers, for calculations at the age of 4. I mean, they were doing these advanced math things. And then they were incredibly intuitive. They could tap into information about you, about your emotions. You know, and this child was also an artist. The child would paint, and they would paint these incredible paintings of these beings and these crafts and these planets, you know. And at that very, very young age, I mean, 4 or 5 years old, this child was like this. And the interesting thing is that this child was a product of this kind of hybridization program because the mother was unable to get pregnant for, I mean, almost her entire life. And she was already in her late 30s, you know, almost early 40s. And all of a sudden she has this contact experience. It wasn't a pleasant one, but she ended up with this child as a result of that. So this is an interesting case, and I know it also reminds me of this young lady, April Malloy, who was also in the film Extraordinary the Seeding, which is a documentary about hybridization that I'm a part of. And her story is also very similar to this. She had a shocking experience. They tried to get pregnant for a long time, and then the child was born. And the child is drawing these incredible messages that they're receiving telepathically from these beings in another state, and just very interesting things. Very interesting things. So this is just some of the examples.
Michael, did you say, were you trying to say something?
No, I think it was my stomach.
Oh, no, I didn't hear anything. I just wasn't sure if I was.
I wanted
so
to-
I guess. Oh, go ahead.
No, do you have something on that, or I'm going to change it?
No, go ahead and change it. We got to touch on some of it. We only got so much time.
All right. I want to talk about consciousness and the ascension and disclosure. It all kind of runs together, doesn't it?
Sure. In what way, though?
Well, it seems that we're living in a time now where I believe a lot of the human population is starting to wake up to what's really going on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you talk about, you know, the underground, you know, the military part of child abductions, and you know, we're approaching a time, I think, where all of this is going to be revealed, right? We're going to ascend into more of a 5D. We're going to broaden our consciousness. You know, Jared and I talk all the time about how we're only using maybe 15% of our brain, right? And it's holding back our consciousness, like we're not experiencing things the way that we are meant to. Like our subconscious is being held back, so to speak. Our consciousness isn't what it's supposed to be. but we're evolving now. We're in a time, I think, now where the human race is actually evolving, and it's going to come down to disclosure. I think we're getting pretty close to disclosure, or something's going to happen. Something's going to break, and what do you think about that?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me this question. I mean, I think it's a matter of just what's really important is not so much waiting for something to happen, because I mean, if you understand how we create our reality, everything that we experience, even these experiences within abductions and contact experience, we are creating them because we are these incredible organisms of projection and creation. And what that means is that right now, what we're going through collectively is kind of a collective evolution, but everything is cyclical. I mean, it's the design of the universe. We create through, the feminine, the masculine. When it unites, it creates. But with this duality, we have the ability to experience both sides of that, polarity. And I think that it's cyclical. We look at the world's history, all the way from Mesopotamia, and up until now. If we just look at the world history, at the cyclical rises and falls of consciousness through history, it's been very interesting. It reaches a certain pinnacle point and then it falls again. And I think we're coming into this where we're approaching another pinnacle point in evolution for us. And for this time around, we are merging technology and consciousness. We're coming into that point where we are now implementing artificial intelligence, and we are moving more towards a technologically advanced world and society. A lot of things are being merged into that now, especially with everything that's happened over the past few months. More so, we are being pushed and drawn to use technology and depend on technology for everything. And I think that's kind of the direction that society was meant to go eventually. But it's not something new. I mean, if you look at your body, if you look at the cellular structure or the way DNA is written in your body, our bodies are the most advanced biotechnology in this matrix multiverse. And a lot of the functions that we are just learning or implementing in our society are mirrored by learning from the technology that's within the physical body. So what's interesting about that is when we're talking about disclosure, I think that where our power lies right now is in our awareness and in the education of what this biotechnology can do, why it's so valuable, why there's a hybridization program, why there's a terrestrial government with all kinds of hidden programs that are meant more to enslave, or let's say, just remove people of their free will and their consciousness to choose. This is a much larger problem than just these little tiny things that are happening. It really has to do with our food industry, with the financial systems that we have, and our political systems. All of these systems are designed in a way to make things very compartmentalized and to further drill in the ideas that we are separate and that we are disconnected somehow from an organic whole. And all of those things play a role in how we see ourselves and the interdimensional realm. The more we see ourselves as all of that interdimensional, physical, these beings, we are multidimensional beings, the more we see ourselves as that, the more we can look behind the veil of the illusion that there is nothing beyond this physical matter. And I think that's where disclosure happens. We begin to understand that we have aspects of ourselves that are interdimensional, that we have alien aspects of ourselves that are encoded within the DNA, that a lot of people, because of the time that we're in right now, because of the ascension, so to speak, that we're moving through right now, it's just the natural cycle in which the vibrational frequency of this entire earth is kind of moving, it's evolving. And it is making that veil very thin, in which we're becoming aware of our parts of us that can be activated, like our superpowers, our psychic abilities, right? Our abilities to telepathically communicate. We are going towards that. And the organic the technology is always going to want to mimic the organic. That's what we're experiencing right now. So I think it's a matter of us finding ourselves and really reconnecting with ourselves and identifying what we are as humans. And I think that's where the power is, both for what we're creating and co-creating with these interdimensional beings and what we're creating here on the physical plane. I think both of those are incredibly important right now.
How much do you think that relates then to organic? I describe, so when I have talks on this too, I right there, I agree with you. It's one of those questions of how deactivated are we from what looks like a very large terraformed system that once was able to connect through the soil and the plants, etc. So how much do you think it's related to the rest of the planet also being intentional and or part of a interconnected system? Do you feel like there is a separation between the other organic high-tech biosystems on the planet, or do you just think they're random plants or random animals?
Random animals? What do you mean random animals?
Well, I think that how do you get a chicken before an egg? You program it. You make a chicken. It's the most obvious, simple answer, but people can't accept that the system itself is because we're seeing, as people understand the actual science, not the woo-woo, but the science of vibrational medicine, that from the time Burr was doing experiments with magnetic fields in 1940s, and here we are with that orthopedic surgeon from New York cutting off the limbs of frogs, which cannot regenerate limbs, and showing that after measuring from salamanders that they can, by creating the right negative magnetic field, that the reality is, once they've done further research, that piezoelectric electronic switching, just like a computer, is going on at the cellular level. And then you have other theories like I like to talk about Johnny Chang, who, the Qigong guy that lights paper on fire. And they did those documentaries about him in the late 80s and 90s, and they've written books on him. And the direct mainstream science that shows nuclear cold fusion at mitochondrial DNA. So I think we're on the precipice of understanding that what we think of as externalized technology, that our very biology, that we are not natural, that we are not a robot, but we're just simply intentionally programmed. And
Yes.
I do think that relates to our biology around us in reference to plants. If we're fully 100% conscious, like Michael was just talking about, like if we're at 10 or 5 or 20% conscious, that if we were fully conscious and using our pineal glands and actually connecting not only to each other through, I bring up synesthesia as an example, having all 5 senses, all that. But the idea then is, how do you see it relating to what we also, in quotes, call the natural world around us? That right now it's running wild, but do you think at some point plants, animals, trees, all of it was more intentional and also part of that system of
Yes.
connectivity?
Yes, absolutely. I definitely agree with all of that. I mean, we are interconnected with everything, and what I see in the patterns of nature is that we are fractals. It's fractal upon fractal upon fractal design, self-similar designs of creation that we're looking at, and the same self-similar designs that you see in trees and plants and the leaves and the branch of a tree, we're seeing within the body, and we're seeing universally. I mean, up in the galaxies, and how they form and move, and how they are moving within their dark space or the dark matter. The way that I look at it is, I mean, we are a sea of this kind of consciousness. We're a sea of this consciousness, and so the idea is, like, how is this consciousness directed? How is it manifesting itself into each individual, thing that we're experiencing? I feel that we are creating this experience. So everything that we see outside of us is something that we are each projecting, and the environment is an extension of ourselves, really. So, when we think about the evolution of mankind, I mean, I think that we are one of probably millions of human experiments, you could say, or manifestations of consciousness that are in this multiverse. I think that we are, there's probably many planets with human types, humanoids, that are experiencing the same thing, either within the, hybridization program, all these kinds of multiplications of consciousness. And I think that what makes it important, what runs that engine, is consciousness itself, and what we know as the soul, which is the engine that runs this organism. I think that this human body is really more of a holographic projection that is playing by the rules of this three-dimensional plane. I mean, it's the physicality of the body comes together as this intelligent organism in order to operate in a three-dimensional plane. But when we look at these other beings, for example, they're highly advanced. These interdimensional beings are highly advanced, and they're on other dimensional planes. So I think that we are sharing our space with these other dimensional planes, but they are all part of this matrix multiverse that we are a part of. They are all part of this three-dimensional plane in which we are playing by the laws of creation, of cause and effect. And I think that the human has the ability to experience this plane, but it also, through its ability to become aware of itself, self-aware, this consciousness becomes aware of its own consciousness, is that it can then employ its free will and choose. So it can choose to continue being in this human body, or it can move on to other aspects of this universe, of this experience. I think the purpose is purely to experience, whatever we're experiencing here. So these manifestations of life forms are happening infinitely. We are talking about infinite consciousness, infinite possibilities of creation that we are able to tap into, and we are just one of those expressions. This is why I don't get mad or angry when I think about these hybridization programs, because I tend to think of it more as an exchange of consciousness. I think that the moment that we apply our free will, because we are now consciousness that is aware of itself, we can then choose our experiences. And I think that's true for any level of consciousness. As we become aware of those levels, we can then learn how to operate and move this system, this organism, which is more than just matter. Matter is being directed by that consciousness and the intention of that consciousness.
Do you think that these organizations, I mean, people ask me the same question, between military and actual, whether it's interdimensional or UFO, somewhere else, do you actually have anyone within the military, not outing anyone, but has anyone actually ever directly confirmed to you that they are involved with either another species, an ancient human, whoever these people are? Has anyone actually ever admitted it?
Well, there are some, I guess you can call them whistleblowers, that talk about some of this stuff. They talk that they were ex-military and they have had these experiences. There are several people around the world that talk about that. But I think what's interesting about that is that these kinds of agendas that people are experiencing, like these cloning programs, I mean, even it's happened even at these conferences that groups of these experiencers were taken. Groups of them were taken at one time. Just when they were gathered together at a conference, they were taken in a truck, and they were taken, and experiments were being done on them by the government, just because they have very heightened, or they're very gifted psychically. They have these incredible activated abilities. And that's something that's been experimented and of great interest to the government since, I don't even know, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. They've been experimenting on consciousness and using it as a weapon through many different projects historically. So I think that this is not something new. This is something very old. The fact is that we just ignore it because I don't think we realize the implications and how it's been implemented in our society on a much larger scale. The fact that we've heard of experiments of remote viewers. I mean, we even know MK Ultras, women and men that were highly, highly trained in their psychic abilities, in every ability, in order to be these mind-controlled weapons, basically. The thing is that same technology that was used is now, it's a global project, and we are a product of that programming. Whether we're watching TV or listening to music, a lot of things are encoded and programmed vibrationally in a way to completely hypnotize humans into a state of disconnect and unawareness. And it's what we're seeing in our society. And it's why these topics are so difficult to talk about, because of the programming that we have that is drilled into our subconscious minds. So I think becoming aware and applying free will means that we have to completely destroy in us all of these false programs of reality, the way that we look at love. Look at this. The word love is still such a difficult topic for people to even understand to this day. Some of us don't even know what it means to be loved or unconditionally loved, truly. And that's a product of programming, and it just shows how disconnected we are from nature, from our creative abilities. So I think that these programs go much, much further, much deeper into our programming, into our genetic code, and everything that we experience outside, including these military experiences, are a direct product of a very deep understanding of how our human bodies operate. The biotechnology of the body, they know exactly how we work. So they know how to manipulate us. They know how to work with our consciousness.
Do you feel like there's something missing? Sorry to interrupt, but do you feel like there's something missing currently? I know that you're obviously working through all your websites and your programs and your work, your counseling and all the work you're doing actively with people. Obviously, they're aware of it. Is there anything you're seeing in reference to those control programs that are so many ones that we could digress, that everybody keeps hearing about on repeat? Is there anything new, dangerous, and or not? I'm not into fear porn. So what I'm thinking of more of is, are there things that, as you're more hyper aware and as you continue to observe it, is there anything in the last few weeks or months? And by the way, this is not leading into our current sci-fi program, but I'm thinking about, in reference to these programs and as they morph and adapt, are you sensing anything new that maybe people should be aware of, that you're seeing implemented, that maybe you've seen maybe 2 or 3 or 4 times, or what that looks like?
Well, I'll just say this. DNA is the currency of the past, the present, and the future. Okay? DNA is going to be the new form of your registration, your DMV, your identity, your credit, all of that. This is the direction that we're heading towards. And I think that as what we're moving into a completely virtual platform of reality. Everything is going to be moved in that direction. And this is where AI will be implemented over the next few years. So I guess I guess that's inevitable. That's inevitable over the next 7 years, unfortunately, unless there is some major awakening where people are choosing the organic. Out of convenience, we opt for more easy things, right? So we want the technology. And the way it's packaged, obviously, is made to make us feel like it's the right choice for us. But what I see is that we really need to get clear about what this technology and what it means to us as sovereign human beings, in a sense. So we want to understand that we are sovereign human beings, but we tend to have hive minds. And it's the manipulation of the hive mind that we want to be completely under some kind of guru, some kind of teacher, some kind of government that will direct how we, operate, our lives, and how we make our choices. So I think that really has to be a call to action right now, that we really check into those choices and decisions that we make, so that we're looking at more holistic choices. Okay, what does that mean? Holistic means that we take everything into consideration, not just your own personal need in that moment, but just the whole, the human race, our health, our environment, all of these things play an important role. And I think that that's the level that we're headed to right now. Is collective consciousness means that we're aware of more than just our individual state. We're aware of a collective wellness. Anything that is destructive, that goes towards personal need and greed and all those things, is going to eventually destruct itself. So everything that we do that is more collective is actually, it has longevity, it has some kind of sustainability that is connective to all. And I think that's where we are coming into a very deep separation in our society, where it's going to be very visible that some people are going more towards, the quick fix and things that are going to cause more destruction. And on the other side, people that are choosing more organic, more conscious, more holistic. So this is kind of a split that I see that's going to be more, I guess, more visible over the next 5 years. So, it's just something to be aware of. I mean, I think we know this, but our choices every single moment direct that. If we understand how consciousness works, how we project into our reality, every thought that you have, every moment is creating what we're going to experience in the next 5-10 years. So, be aware here, be present, be in this body. I really teach a lot about the technology of the body, because that's where everything begins and everything ends, for each person and collectively.
Well, we can all manifest where we go, right? All of us?
Well, yes. And the thing is that the mind is complex. So what runs the program of creation is the subconscious mind. So if on the outside we have a happy face and we're good, but on the inside we have a lot of unresolved emotions, problems, fears, anxieties, that's what's going to be running the show. So our internal work really not only heals our own body, but helps us make choices that are closest to the most constructive things for yourself and others. The problem is that for a long time, we have been so unaware of ourselves and everything that we're doing that we keep making these choices that fall short, not just for ourselves, but others, So the more aware we are of how we function, how we create, the more we can really affect in a better way,
All right.
the
And I
whole.
wanted to ask you about, I guess, the ascension. We're coming up on a period where the I believe us as humans, we can ascend. Now, does it seem like there's a group that's trying to keep us from ascending, and that maybe we've already missed it. It's too late now. We didn't do it, or is it we still have a chance to do this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, the way we look at ascension has to change. I find one of the things, just to also add to the last question, a lot of mind control is actually occurring in our reality, in which sometimes it comes through channeled messages, and through channeled messages, if the vessel of that channeled message isn't really a clear and in alignment vessel, a lot of the messages that come through are going to be confusing, cause a lot of mass confusion and a lot of deception. So that's also something that I really want, to put out there, because spirituality is, like in every historical timeline, has been, weaponized in a way. It's been utilized to control. So that being said, the whole concept that we are ascending now between, let's say, 4th and 5th dimension, that's not really how it works. I mean, we're moving through multiple dimensions at all times. We're constantly moving in and out of dimensions. And evolution is a natural function of the entire movement of this entire multiverse that we're a part of. It moves in a spiral, and every spiral is a cycle of ascension that is experiencing the polarity that we're experiencing here in this 3-dimensional plane. So we're constantly moving through rise and fall cycles of life and death. We have to get used to that. So from one perspective, I can tell you, yes, we're being controlled by this dark hidden government and the reptilians and the draconians, But on the other side of it, if you look at it from a higher place, what we're experiencing here is duality. And what we need to understand is that the dark, quote unquote, dark side, because it rejects its own consciousness, it becomes a parasite. So it needs to feed off something else. If you are the white side, let's say the light, the consciousness, and you are unaware of yourself, you're going to fall into the category of parasitic consciousness. Because this is the function of consciousness. When we let's say we don't love ourselves, when we feel unworthy, we become parasites in a sense, because we need from external sources to provide us value, validation, love, understanding, acknowledgement, all these things, for example. That is the same design that is macro, like in this larger collective as a human race. When the human race is disconnected from its consciousness and its awareness and creation, it also has to fall under the guise of these laws of parasitic consciousness. And anytime that we're unaware of our bodies, we become a vessel for walk-ins, for entities, for attachments, for all of these negative alien or interdimensional agendas, because we're unaware of the body, so it becomes a host. Okay, so it's the same way on the larger picture. As we're ascending, we are experiencing this polarity. So we get to choose every moment what side of that you want to look at. Do you want to look at this wholeness and light and consciousness, or do you want to be a parasitic consciousness? It really just, it's up to you. And to be honest, my opinion is that there is no right and wrong. I think that we are experiencing here all of it. That's kind of what we're here to do. We're experiencing polarity. Our bodies are fragmented, and within the bodies is organized infinite consciousness. So we have the ability of navigating this human experience through all of those things. I guess the difference is that one results in life and the other results in death, right? And wherever you are at the end of your cycle of life, whatever your vibrational frequency is at the end, you are going to be a resonance to the next experience that you have. And this happens the moment that we're speaking right now. It happens in the collective. It happens in dream time. It happens in death. It's the same law of creation for all those levels of awareness.
So do you think that there's do you think that there's like a war going on right now between the good and the bad?
I mean, you could say that there's some kind of war, and I think that it's really just ourselves. Either we're conscious or we're not. Either we want to apply free will and choose what we're going to experience, or we don't. We become food for parasites, in other words. And we do so through hybridization program, and that's there's so much more to talk about that, because it's very complex. You have to understand what the soul is. You have to understand how the soul moves in different bodies, what it means to have a child, and what happens with your soul. There's so many things that are a part of that. But ultimately, I think that it's an experience. We're experiencing polarity, and we have a choice which one we want to experience.
Yeah, and like I said, that's why I wanted to get you on again. We never even got to talk about fragmented souls or timeline blockages or any of that stuff, and that's definitely where I want to go when we pick this up in just a couple weeks. Jared, do you have anything else? We have a few more minutes.
Yeah, well, so what's your thoughts then on how much is your references on post-flood religions?
Yeah, I mean, that comes up a lot in the research, right? As a very impactful.
Yeah, we need to use it, but how? Yeah, how much of it? I guess the question in your discernment between all of them. Obviously, there's standouts, but I guess what are the standouts in these slivers of truths? What do you have one? Do you prescribe by one in particular, or do you see? It's not about all of them being la la, happy, good, and they all relate and believe whatever you want. That's not the issue. The issue is how much of the technology or our past is hidden, and or what are you getting out of observing these mystifications of these technologies?
Yeah, such a heavy question. There's so much to say there, but
your time. We have a part 2 coming.
Okay. But what I see is that, but there's really no such thing as hidden technology per se. Okay. And I think that all the technology is available to us. It's just, it's controlled. What we're able to see is controlled. What we're able to know is controlled, in order to carry out a directive. Okay. And this is just the way that it's perceived by us, because we're human and our perception is very limited. What we can understand of this universe and how everything is moving is limited, because we only know what we know. We can't go beyond that. So when I look historically at how our technology is moving, I think that eventually we're creating humans is what's happening, right? We're creating and mimicking these humans. Our body is a product of incredibly advanced technology. And so what we see and what we're told our historical timeline is, who knows? There's so many levels and cycles of elevated technology that we've had, from the Mayans to the Egyptians and so on and so forth. And I think that our understanding of what we see in the ruins in those petroglyphs are very limited, really. We're barely touching the iceberg of what's really there for us to understand in terms of our technology. But I think that we don't need to dive so deep into what we see outside. I think that the unlocking of all that technology is by understanding our physical bodies. I tend to look. The Emerald Tablets, the Book of Enoch, the story of Gilgamesh. All of these stories, the origin stories of life, I think are a very, very interesting depiction of how we have come to be in this matrix multiverse. I think that we are this fragment of a source that has manifested itself and created this life, and we are a product of that, and that we're moving through cyclical cycles of those patterns of rise and fall of intelligence. So I think that we're reaching an interesting point in history here, where we are now merging the consciousness and the artificial intelligence. And I guess it's left to see how much further we get in that.
Well, and how much artificially do you think? Here, I can't have you answer I'm not asking you to sort out the military thing that none of us know, but how much of what you're looking at really to you says this is artificial?
Well, you know what? The only thing the difference between artificial intelligence and, the organic is consciousness, is really the soul. That's the only thing, really, and the awareness of that consciousness within this organic. Because if we look at ourselves and if we're not conscious of our consciousness, we're basically like robots. We function like artificial intelligence. We take directives on a mass scale. How many of us are completely hypnotized and disconnected from our organic self? So I think that the difference is our option of choosing consciousness and becoming aware of that. That's the only thing that's the difference. The soul and the awareness of that soul and the function of that consciousness in that soul is the only difference between the organic and this artificial intelligence.
So of all the people you've worked with, without, of course, disclosing anyone's personal stuff, have you seen two different people that have identical experiences or close to it, incredibly similar, but have completely different religious matrix, artificial, dimensional? They're describing it completely differently, but you're looking at two people who've had the identical experience. Does that happen?
Yeah. Yes, all the time. That's an interesting question. I'm in the process of creating this survey for hybrid parents. It's going to be an application, and I'm developing that, and it'll be out, before the end of this year, to study all of these different, aspects of the hybridization program and the psychology behind that. But they come from very different backgrounds. I get everything. I get everything from atheists to, Islamic religious backgrounds, Buddhism, everything, Christianity, Catholicism. And their experiences, this is the interesting thing, are incredibly similar. incredibly similar. Everything down to the technology that's being discovered in my support groups. I hold these support groups, international support groups, once a month. We're hearing stories from these people, and it's amazing to hear them. This person in Germany hears the story of the person right here in San Francisco, and it's like they see the exact same tool. I have them draw out what they see, and they show each other, and it's mind blowing. So there's definitely something going on, and that's why I always question, like, whatever it is that we're experiencing, there's an element here that is similar, and we see the same kind of uh, descriptions of things in the 50s as we've seen now, right? I guess everything is in the collective subconscious mind at some point, but some of us have more access than others, I think.
All right.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
Jared, do you have one last thing? Because I guess we got to wrap it up.
Michael will make fun of me later. Yeah, Jared, I asked him if he had one more thing to ask.
Well, I do have one more thing to ask, but I want you to get in yours first.
No, we're not saying goodbyes, but I appreciate your time and really just love all the research and the efforts. I'm so sorry for some of the things that have happened to you. I know you aren't defined by those tragedies at all, but I do think it's worth acknowledging. And the work you've chosen to do and where you've gone with everything is very mind-blowing. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you more. So I'd rather start with that than a question, but your turn. Go ahead.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
I wanted to ask a question. Have you spoke with many people that have come out of the experimentation tunnels that the military has?
Experimentation? You mean underground?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Like what's down there? Like how many people are down there? We hear reports a lot. I guess of there's a lot of missing kids in the world, and reports of them, possibly being down in these tunnels and being experimented on. Any reports or have you talked to any people that have come out of there? You were saying you were down there. Then,
Yeah.
What exactly is going on down there?
Yes. Well, that is a topic for another time. You get into a very dark aspect of our government and the handlings of, children and many people. I don't choose necessarily to focus on military abductions. I do have a couple contacts that do focus on that, and they have support groups for that specific topic. One of my good friends, Misha Johnston, for example, was a MyLab herself, and she hosts support groups for this. But and I've been to the support groups several times because just to discuss these events that have happened, and the stories are pretty dark. You really get into some dark experiences, and oftentimes these ex-military families that are targeted and are involving children and the adults and the family members in there. And I mean, this is just a program on a whole different level.
It's kind it's kind of an occult, right?
Well, I mean, you could say that, but I mean, I guess a cult, the practices that are being carried out there are quite, they're based in a lot of really pagan, satanic, ritualistic type of practices that people are being involved in, and it is quite. You hear the same thing over and over again. The same kind of experiences that happened. Anyway, a lot of dark stuff. Yeah.
So it's all related, and I guess I was listening to another show that was discussing this subject, and they say that it's like, I guess the deep state, the dark side of the government that's trying to suppress humanity. They all believe that they're the sons of Cain, so to speak, and it goes into the whole bloodline thing you were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes, it has a lot to do with the bloodlines. I mean, the majority, if you understand how these bloodlines actually stayed and they preserved their bloodlines for centuries. I mean, think about the main bloodlines. I mean, look at the Pope, the Roman Catholic Church and the Vatican, and how they manage their, the finances there, and all of the things that happened as a result of these bloodlines that were preserved through history. so much has been pushed and implemented into society as a result of those things. And the majority of their practices that they do in order to stay in power are these kinds of pagan, satanic, ritualistic things that they do. And they're using the laws of physics and reversing them. They inverse them completely. And that this is why you can see that they have a very profound understanding of what the human technology is. Because what they do is they invert it. They invert everything from sex to love to money to all these things in our world that we see outside of us that are the managing currencies of reality. They are inverting and manipulating in a way. And this is the best way to destruct and create fragmentation in the human soul is through these kinds of things.
All right. And just to leave everybody on a positive note, is there hope for us?
Oh my gosh, we are. Absolutely. Everything is in our hands. When we become aware of ourselves, we are the creators and we can change and choose our free will, which is the most important thing, to understand what it means to have free will and to utilize that. So, that's why I like to let everyone know that looking at things from above, we're experiencing polarity and that's all, but we can choose at every moment.
From darkness to light, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, wonderful. If you guys want to get a DNA reprogramming with me or a hypnotherapy session, you can visit me at GeraldineOrozco.com. You can also join my hybrid parent and experiencer support group once a month at hybridmother.com. And yeah, I just want to thank you guys so much for having me on the show. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Of
Thank you so
course,
much.
we have a lot to get into, the DNA reprogramming and the fragmented souls and all kinds of neat stuff. And just so everybody knows, all of the links will be in the description box below. Definitely check out the websites. It's fascinating stuff. Certainly fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll be right back on Conflict Radio right after this. And welcome back to Conflict Radio. That was Geraldine Orozco. Jared, did you learn anything?
Yeah. Today has been brought to you by the number 6 and the letter A. Seriously, it's fun to listen to someone who has had terrifying nightmare experiences, but has not only recovered from them, and build a career and connect so many, maybe thousands of people around the world directly through her experiences from her childhood to where she is now, and to be able to communicate a lot of the things that you and I were just talking about having covered and discussed, from Michael Cremo to Scott Walter to ourselves, you and I just talking that there is something complex going on with our genome, with who we were, who we are. And I just got to hear, I think, a spectrum of all the things that I just mentioned and another complex portion of it. We know there's a military component to this. We know that there is a secret organization component. We know that there are misinterpretations of name the religion being injected into this. And we know that there is some other entity, either dimensional or you name it. And at the end of the day, people are finally platforming and discussing and tabling their experiences. And where do we start?
Yeah.
How do you conclude this? What do you think? This is crazy.
Well, there is no conclusion. This is part 1, so we can just leave it there, and we'll talk about, I guess, a little bit more of this in a few weeks. We'll have her back on again on the 22nd of March. So I look forward to the continuation of our talk. But man, that was fascinating. There's so much that you don't really think about until you talk to somebody like this, and especially when it comes to the human hybridization. I mean,
yeah, there's a mystery behind it. Why are they doing it? Who's doing it? Why are they doing it? What are they missing?
Yeah, and
what are they?
It makes me question your book. Like I mean, obviously we know that your book, not aliens, it's us, right? Like we know that there's an advanced human race on this planet. We know that, but But the question is, are there other advanced races, interdimensional or from other, for other worlds that are visiting us, and obviously they're in communication with the advanced humans, right? I mean, you don't rule that out, right?
I never rule it out. The issue is the more you look in the ground, I actually don't talk about this. I've never said this, how scary the complexity of the technology in the ground is. I mean, I don't say the word scary. I'll talk about weaponization, scalar waves, and how crazy, the power of these weapons could have been. But I don't talk about how scary it is, because the idea of this race of us falling or disagreeing with each other, turning on each other, and or continuing their own genetic experiments where we have people saying, well, I know there's reptilians. I'm not saying that there's not. I'm saying, and I have before, that those reptilians could just be a modified human, and not because they're humans and that they're reptilians. It's just that they're choosing, in the complexity of what you can do with DNA, which we didn't get into her yet, is that it could easily be an internalized disagreement between two different covens of ancient advanced humans, but it could also be a war that was fought, or a conflict between advanced humans and something else from somewhere else. Could it be interdimensional? Could it be from another planet? Could it be both? And at the end of the day, everybody lost, or there was a mutual accord to back off each other and leave the remnants, the base elements of humanity alone, which is the people we call dynastic Egyptians and Mayans, etc., and all that. We've already talked about it. But then, do they retreat underground? Are they in forests that we don't generally have access to? There's so many places to hide underwater. Where are they? And are they just choosing to say, here's the line you don't cross, and this group's over here and this group's over there, and here's what you don't do with the surface humans anymore? And they're not where we are, and so why the experiments? And is it that, or is it military?
Maybe the advanced humans are keeping us all in the dark because we got our butts kicked a few thousand years ago, and they
there's
don't
no
want that
point
to happen again, right?
Yeah, maybe it's like they don't want us to panic, but there's something not right with the experiments, in that they're not asking us first. They don't think they need to. That's the thing. They don't, no matter what they're trying to do, benevolent or not, they think it's clearly beneath them to ask me or the people they're abducting whether or not they have a right to do it. They think it's like tranking an animal in Africa and bringing it to a zoo, Hatari.
Yeah, well, I was listening to a show, I guess a week or two ago, that was saying that, that's what I was asking her, that they're the sons of Cain. If they believe that they're the sons of Cain, of course they don't need our permission for anything. They believe that they're so much more superior than us. We're not even the same race as they are, and that's
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah, because there's this practice detachment of, if you're going to be a butcher, that
Hmm.
it's been shown with soldiers. People are offended that they're laughing at what they're doing, but I think killing anybody is an unnatural state, and the only way the human mind can disassociate itself are these breaks, are these descriptions we give. You are a lesser because you're this race, you're a lesser because you're this age, they have to create a distinction, whatever it is. It's like that Dr. Seuss novel with the two different races, the what's their names with the stars on them, and then the star remover came along, and I can't remember the book, but it's kind of the same story.
Yeah.
Where what is it that they're doing, and we need to be aware of it, but it's not a collective. I'm not worried about the collective agreement of it all yet. It's more about our. Again, it's easier right now in our paradigm to believe that they came from interdimensions. They came from outer space. They came from another planet. It is not easy for us to get our heads around the idea that multiple variants of advanced humans, just like we each trip out our cell phones differently and put different screensavers on, and we each buy different cars, and we wear different clothes, and we marry different people, and we have different attractions, and what we eat, everything, you name it, there's variations. And we think that if we got advanced enough that we wouldn't do the same thing with, oh, well, we do it with tattoos and we do it with piercings. Why would we not do it with, well, I don't want to look human, I want to look reptilian, I want to look like a giant, I like being short. I mean, there's something for everyone, and there's a point where this technology either quits or gets massively devastated, and people are separated, and clearly something happens on this planet where the total population doesn't recover. And then it's just, we look at it now and we see these advanced ships and hear these stories, and we assume much more easily that there's no way somebody from our own planet would do this to us or not help us or give us a cure to cancer.
Yeah. It's definitely, this is a fascinating topic. I can't wait till we talk to her some more. Jared, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, you can grab my book, It's Not Aliens, Worse It's Us, Discovering Our Lost History. That's on Amazon for a few dollars more. You can go to notaliens.com, and you can also get the book and a subscription to the private member area where we say things that would not go well on other public platforms. Now, you can enter a coupon code. It's the only one we got. It's for conflict. It's conflict only. That's lowercase. If you enter that, you get a discount. And you can get a book, you can get a membership, and you can get a bumper sticker. It's not a scratch and sniff, but it is one of only, 70, 50 bumpers?
Yeah, I think there's like 30 left.
Yeah, so we got 30 left of the original Conflict branded logo, and that's where I'm at.
Awesome.
And,
well, go ahead. You said and?
Well, and of course, what's our next episode? What are we doing next? What are we doing this week?
I don't know. I guess I'll look at it later. Just remember, you can always find us online. Just go to www.conflictradio.net. You can find us on YouTube. Subscribe if you aren't subscribed to Conflict Radio Official. We also have Conflict TV Official YouTube channel. Check that out. We're going to be beaming some content on that station pretty soon from America's Stonehenge. I guess there's quite a few of us that are going to be meeting up there pretty soon. More details on that to come. You can always find us on Spreaker and Apple iTunes, all of your normal podcast catchers. That's going to do it for us. Keep an eye on the store tab of conflictradio.net. There's going to be some items in there soon. If you want to get a cup or a t-shirt or a hoodie, they'll be in there shortly. Well, let's just call it a day, I suppose. Batten down the hatches and be safe.